Welcome to section 2 of my Broken Crayons series. As I mentioned yesterday in the first one, my plan is to do 15 of these over the 3 weeks ahead of us. And yesterday was just introducing the idea that there are human traits that are more predominantly found in highly creative people. And the fact that all those traits are traits that human beings can all develop to some degree. Now, whether or not some people are born with the capacity to do far more than others, that's been a debatable issue, like chicken egg, which came first. Whether or not you can turn someone with a general interest in painting into a Van Gogh, or at the level of a Van Gogh, that's been up for debate for many years. Can people who have an interest in art appear to have some born skills or early developed skills turn into people who can mimic or imitate an artist? That's also been done because many artists have been taught their skills by copying, by imitating. My own self, without any guidance, because I could not speak well, so I'm having difficulty right now because of the work on my teeth, and had some more done today, the second step. I was not able to speak well. People could not understand me. My mother seemed to be able to. But my way of communicating and spending my time was copying cartoons, tracing them, or simply copying them. I might be looking at a drawing that's the normal size of the newspaper, but I draw it 5 times bigger. I was developing hand and eye coordination. Now, not everybody has that same level that they're born with. Perhaps I was born with it. I don't know. But it can be developed. It's like some people, like my youngest son, seems to have a 4-dimensional or 3-dimensional ability in space. A ball is hit towards him on a tennis court. He seems to know where it's going. It's not just experience. At least that's been my interpretation over the years watching him play. All right, let's get into the second topic. What I titled in my book, Unwrapped Pieces in Action, or Description of Actions Taken by Crayon Breakers, meaning people who maximize or at least use at a much higher level their creative thinking abilities. And I'm welcoming Charles. Hi, Charles McVinney. Good to see you, or see that you're listening. Comment is one of the things once I got involved with creativity in the middle 70s through reading articles and then going to my first SIPSI in Buffalo, the Creative Problem Solving Institute. I became fascinated by looking into the backgrounds and lives of famous people. One of my reading subjects as a child, on up to a few years ago, right now I've got 2 books I barely have gotten into, but they're the same idea, biographies and autobiographies. I've been fascinated about reading about people and learning about them. But once I started to learn about creative thinking and the fact that we can learn to become more creative, we can develop skills, we can learn techniques and methods and processes, all these different names for doing things deliberately that will force us to be creative on the moment or in the moment. So I started looking back at the biographies and the ones that I had heavily marked up, which was quite a common practice of mine while I read, and looked for the traits. And what I started to find among those 32 traits, just a sampling that I showed yesterday, is that the highly creative people had at least 5 of those or more, and they maximized them. In many cases, they knew deliberately that they were. Hi, Nick. Bringing your children home soon, I hope. Little side comment, it's a habit of mine. But what I would find, I look at a Henry Ford, there were certain traits in the list of 32 that he seemed to be very strong in, whether he was aware of it or not. People like Napoleon Hill, who wrote about people like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison and Firestone and Goodyear and so many of the great inventors and business moguls of 100 years ago, there were some common threads, but they weren't all identical. So what I encourage you to do in the next, maybe before you go to sleep, or if you're at the beginning of your day, before you start your work day, make a list of the people you consider highly creative. Who are heroes in your mind, in your occupation, your profession, your areas of interest? Painters, writers, inventors, business people, even some politicians, and I won't go there with any more. But on the list I had in my book originally, I had Walt Disney, of course. He had been a hero of mine most of my life. When I got involved with the teaching of office-related or business-related topics like leadership, communication, teamwork, and so forth, Sam Walton was one that popped up. J.C. Penney also. But in entertainment, we have numerous ones. Elvis Presley, of course, from my teenage years. You have great scientists like Einstein. And there are some politicians or people who became went into the political, a man named William Schaefer, who did a lot of really creative things while he was mayor of Baltimore and then eventually governor of Maryland. And then you have athletes like Fosbury, if those of you who follow the Olympics or that type of sport, who created the backwards jump, or what became the Fosbury jump, and proved that you could jump higher doing that. Of course, the two Steves from Cupertino, Jobs and Wozniak. How about your family? Is one of your brothers or sisters, an uncle, an aunt, a mother or father, maybe more creative knowingly? All right. So from your list, I'm asking you to consider the following. What do they have in common? One of the things I've discovered over the years is first, they usually accept that nothing is perfectly done yet. They don't necessarily accept anything as being perfect, that they always can be made better. Everything can be done differently. Look at any product that you see within an arm's length or reach from where you are right now. Of course, the obvious is those of the cell phone. The idea that there used to be a phone with a curly cord sitting on that counter behind me. Now the phone goes wherever I want it to go. A third is that there are no limits to creativity or ingenuity. We are not at a stopping point. Things can always get better. And no one has created the final solution yet. All right. I used to collect quotes, as I've noticed a lot of speakers have a tendency to do, and also authors, to try to drive their point home. And one that I used in my book and used to quote quite often, everything that can be invented has been invented. That was supposedly said by the director of the patent office, the first director, in 1899. And of course you get people laughing and so forth when you say that. The only trouble is when I did some backup work on that, I found out there was no truth to that. But there have been other things like Ronald Miller, Walt Disney's son-in-law, who supposedly is given credit to this comment. We will never release our cartoons and movies on videotape. And we'll give you an idea of when we're talking about. We're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. There's too great a danger of illegal copying. Whole industries have been created by the idea of copying. And one of our presidents, I used to say it was Garfield, but once again, doing real check, I found out no evidence of Garfield saying it. But this president reportedly said sensible and responsible women do not want the right to vote. Even watching a Foley's War episode recently, I saw that same quote being used in the English setting of World War II. But things like experts today usually can't see tomorrow. For instance, Lord Kelvin supposedly said heavier than air flying machines are impossible. That's 120, 130 years ago. Man will never find a practical use for the atom. Lord Ernest Rutherford. The sad part about that, it was one of his students who went on to fracture or break up the atom and lead to the whole atomic energy field. And then supposedly Harry Warner in the 1920s said, who the hell wants to hear actors talk anyway? Now, think about today. Lots of talk about robots. And yes, lots of jobs are being replaced by robots or machines or systems. Of course, in addition, 10 great numbers of jobs are being replaced, period, because they're no longer needed. And you no doubt can list several of them yourself from your own personal life. How about malls? I remember when the first mall in Detroit was built in the 50s. It was called Northland. It was one of the earliest in the United States. I think the one in Seattle was supposedly the official first one. But Northland I only saw once or twice until I became an adult as a college student, because it was way on the northwest side of Detroit. We had Eastland. But now malls are dying. They're closing down. It's not the approach, apparently. That's left to be seen. And all that maybe because of Amazon, eBay, and a lot of the online company systems that have come up. And then another issue that's talked about, I can't turn on my computer and scan through Facebook and not see items about self-driving vehicles. In 1956 and 7, I had a habit of looking at my dad's Mechanics Illustrated and another similar magazine. They were similar in format to National Geographic. And the cover story was the people riding in what would be called a large, very large motorhome. And there were the 4 people on the upper level sitting and playing bridge while the vehicle rode down the street by the highway. When I was an architectural student, there was talk about the idea of an automatic street in Detroit on Woodward. It would run about 2 miles from 8 Mile Road to 6 Mile Road. So we were doing imaginary projects in which the idea was vehicles would all be controlled by computers. Now there's more serious talk because apparently, according to the articles I'm scanning, is that all the big 3 and some of the other auto companies beyond us are all working on some kind of automatic vehicle. Tesla and some of the others. So here's a couple quotes that come from maybe some, only one is a big known name, but one, a minister, speaker, author from years ago, said, creativity is a new way of seeing all things. It is finding angles not looked at before, new perspectives, new frameworks, new positions. And I've always loved this one by Walt Disney. It's always fun to do the impossible, because that's where there's less competition. And this one, I never did find the name, and if you know the name of this one, please share it with me. Nowadays, people who say it can't be done are being interrupted by someone else doing it. So, to wrap up this session, I'm going to give you a couple suggestions to consider for tomorrow or this evening or today, depending on where you are. Let's see, I've got 2 people from Asia, and most of the rest of you that are viewing at the moment or have been viewing are from the U.S. in different parts of the country. Deliberately broaden your interests. Go to a bookstore, a library, scan your computer, looking up topics you've never read anything about before. The beauty of the web and the internet and Google and Bing and all the other search engines is you don't even need to leave wherever you are. You can use your phone, your tablet, your watch, if you're the type that has an iWatch, and broaden your interests. Deliberately choose a topic that you've never read before. I used to do that when I had doctor's appointments. I would deliberately pick up a magazine that I had never read before. Reverse viewpoints or perspectives deliberately. Think in the opposite way. Edward de Bono had a book called Poe, and it was basically provocative thinking. What the intention was, you deliberately took a position that would cause people to go, what? What are you talking about? It's not possible. But deliberately take that point of view as if, of course it is. It's always been possible. And then think from there. Open yourself up to infinite number of ideas. Keep collecting. Don't settle. Pick back and let your imagination float. For those of you who have wonderful third eyes, unfortunately mine never had film in it. I have to draw or make or build or write out descriptions of what I'm thinking about because I can't close my eyes and see it. It doesn't work. Deliberately look at the process you're doing and take out steps and see what happens. Be cautious. It can be dangerous. Combine ideas, of course. Rearrange steps in the area. Adapt or alter existing ideas. Yield not to temptation to give up and quit. Keep trying. That is one common trait that I've seen in highly creative people that I've looked at in every field I can imagine is they never gave up. Never gave up. And so forth. So I'm going to post these 12 plus ideas as an item on my Facebook page. So if you want to print them out for yourself, add your own. But the key is go have fun and relax. Do new things, at least part of every day. And then go hike or walk backwards for a mile. A friend of mine, Kevin, oh, now I'm going blank in his name. Anyways, professor of philosophy, one of the things he did many years ago just to challenge himself was to walk up a mountain backwards. Years later, I took him up a mountain in South Africa, but we walked straight up that time. Or bowl opposite-handed. Unfortunately now, because of torn rotator cuffs, I can't bowl either way. Walk around your backyard blindfolded. You can generate thousands of these things. The key is different, new, unusual, unique. Do it for a few minutes, maybe a half hour, and then watch how your attitude towards that day changes. So I see William Hodges, thanks. Disney quote reminds me of a quote. Let's see, I love working on things that seem impossible because I am not expected to succeed. So if I don't, there is no downside when I do look like a genius. Add that. I'm going to add that to the list. Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing that during this short thing. On to chapter 3 tomorrow, and then 4, 5, 6, and so forth. Thank you for coming. And I will post this as soon as I get it downloaded onto my YouTube channel so that you can share it with your friends, colleagues, relatives, strangers, maybe your competition. This is when I hope there's rumbling laughter in the background, but doing this is a one-way thing. It's a little challenge for me. I'm used to having an audience. Anyway, thank you again. I hope you found some things of value in these 15 to 17 minutes, and I will see you tomorrow.